So then we are back with more understanding from the time of the Second Tabernacle services, where we find in the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Israelic lineage. So then we can understand the time of the end as per Yeshayahu the prophet. We find in the 61st chapter related with the returning of the holy cities of the Messiah laid waste from many centuries, and also the understanding of the spring feast, autumn feast, and importantly is then mentioning while this situation then is transitioning itself from the time of the 1,000 years of deceit, and we are during the time of the dragon, where then we find the kingdom of the east, north, and south making the most decisions, and then the other nations then obviously must rebuild and becoming then partners of the trade of the end. Thus far, last night there was a report regarding then the situation of our own Navy in Singapore and trying, balancing the power, and truly it's not going to work. Reason why, it's because Daniel, he said very precisely as per the instructions related with the king of the north, king of the south, and the king of the east. Those are the main players of the time of the end. Thus far we are trying then to set up our ships elsewhere in the world, and it's not going to work. So let's understand why not. Daniel then, when he was explaining the 11th chapter, then obviously a person must be acquainted with the times and the seasons. Times and the seasons then relates with then spring feast, autumn feast, relates with then also the time of the restoration of the holy cities returning, and with this the Gentiles were included in the plan on a Gentile level, where then must be played as per instructions. We understand the Northern Kingdom is the Soviet Union. They will dominate then the military around the world. It is very obvious, because when we read the understanding of the 11th chapter, you find then the later the status of the Soviet Union is higher than the first. China is absolutely related with trade. They are pure trade. China has no interest in terms of military and invading somebody else's land and the such. What they want is simply protecting those friends, making trade with them. However, if this friendship with China and its partners is not respected, such as the encroachment of Americans in their areas, then we get ourselves in trouble. So then what can we expect? We are going to be chased around by the Soviets. It is absolutely sure. There was then yesterday in Moscow Times articles related with, firstly, the establishment of then the Socialist Party. If you read, then you understand. Secondly, is then a visit of important Soviet leaders in South America, and the first country was Cuba. So then, if we understand the simple fact of the structure of the scripture, or then the instructions given by Daniel, given by Yeshayahu, we find very precisely we must humble ourselves, retrieve, and then rebuild. But we are then knuckleheads. We want to try to go in somebody else's place, and we are going to be chased around by the Soviets. It's absolutely sure as the sun comes up every morning. So then let's understand then this fact, because China must yet make other deals around the world. Have to make a deal, for instance, with France. Then France must lead the way of the dismantling of the Eurozone. Then comes, obviously, other countries of the Pacific must be integrated with the Chinese system. Then South America, the entire world must be integrated with their system. And thus far, our country used to be leaders during the time of the deceit of roughly the last couple hundred years. But we are no longer in this privileged position. Then the instructions are active, and then we must respect then the schedule. So then let's understand and not waste our time trying to place ships then in the Pacific or then elsewhere, because they have not invited us. They are not having wars. We are encroaching ourselves in areas where we don't belong. We simply should get out of there, come home, and then rebuild. If we do this, then we are in harmony with the instructions, and then we prosper. If we try to do otherwise, it's going to be a headache. Or then chased around by the Soviets, because they are coming back. They will protect those countries making deals with China. So let's make sure we understand, so then we won't waste our time. Because it's truly expensive. You know, paying for the ships, and then paying for the crew, paying for their provisions, and then they go around doing patrols in areas where we were not invited. And then most importantly would be then China making deal with the Middle East. It was said this last year, if we would not purchase the war from Israel in Gaza, China would be already in the Middle East. So why would we then expend more of our very limited resources, where we should then rebuild our economy, and then sending ships, very expensive, in areas where we were not invited? It doesn't make any sense. And then the Chinese, obviously, they don't like our presence there. So what are we doing over there? It makes no sense. People are monitoring what goes on around the world. The BRICS countries, they are already going to get rid of USD. Isn't that enough, for instance, indication where then they are rejecting our system? And should, because the system is being implemented. It's a new system given, provided, so people can work. So then the first nation of the Latin America visits of the Soviet Union is Cuba. That's the first. So then we can expect Cuba is going to become very developed. Very short time, they should receive then more provisions in more stores, and then making then the island a patrol posting of the Americas. It's obvious. Then we find the northern section, since we understand next year then the Panama Canal is going to be then available. And it's a very great deal, because when a ship, for instance, loaded with cars goes through the canal, they charge roughly $200,000 for a ship. So it's very lucrative. But then comes the northern area of Canada, for instance, the Northwest Passage, where then icebreakers can maintain the place nearly open year-round. It is obviously then an alternative for the northern area of Canada, and then themselves becoming the distribution center of the north. Since we are not upgrading our airports, we are not upgrading our ports, and then if you ask then the giant Chinese, what can we do? Not much. We are bankrupt. Our airports and ports are not being upgraded. What can we expect? We have barely no industry. It has to be rebuilt. And because of the Northwest Passage is then north of Canada, obviously they have more infrastructure over there, as they rebuild their ports and airports, they become the distribution center of the North. And then combining with the Soviet Union also from the North is a great alternative other than the Panama Canal. Great savings. So why are we mixing up our military in areas where we are not invited? Ugh. Please stay tuned, much more coming up.